Perched high on a hill overlooking the glittering city lights, the Cross estate stood silent, like a lone sentinel under the September moon. The mansion was a masterpiece of modern design. Sharp lines, polished stone, and floor-to-ceiling glass panels that reflected wealth but offered no warmth. To Luna Bennett, a 22-year-old girl from a dusty small town in the Midwest where cornfields stretched endlessly, it was both a lifeline and a labyrinth. She had arrived 6 months ago, clutching a small suitcase, hoping to build a better future than the one she left behind. Luna was no stranger to hardship. Orphaned at 10, she grew up in an overcrowded foster home, quickly learning that dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford. With her brown hair tied neatly in a ponytail and eyes as clear and as still as a quiet lake, she carried a beauty that needed no display. Her smile was rare, appearing only when she was alone, tending the herb garden behind the servants' quarters or scribbling in a worn journal about a life she barely dared to imagine. A small house with a front porch, a job she loved, and someone who truly saw her. But for now, her reality was the gray aprons she wore and the endless duties of a housemaid, polishing silver, scrubbing floors, and staying invisible in the vast halls of Damian Cross's estate. Damian Cross, 34, was the kind of man who seemed to control the world without trying. As the CEO of Cross Enterprises, he had turned the family real estate company into an empire that reshaped city skylines. Tall and broad-shouldered, with jet black hair and striking features, he carried himself like someone who had never known failure. But beneath the tailored suits and confident handshakes was a man scarred by betrayal. His ex-wife, a rising actress, had left him 3 years ago for a rival developer, taking with her half of his faith in people. Since then, Damian lived by one simple rule: everything has a price, and emotions are a liability. He worked late, his office glowing above the hill, a lone figure surrounded by contracts and whiskey. The Cross estate was more than a home. It was a boundary. To Luna, it was survival, a stepping stone to a better future. To Damian, it was a fortress shielding him from a world he no longer trusted. Their paths rarely crossed. Luna moved through the mansion like a shadow, her steps light on the marble floors, while Damian's presence filled the room with a gravity that made her heart race, though she'd never admit it. She knew her place, a girl from nowhere polishing chandeliers for a man who could buy the whole town. But in quiet moments, when she caught him staring out the window, his shoulders heavy with an invisible weight, she wondered if he, too, was searching for something deeper. As the autumn leaves began to fall, scattering reds and golds across the manicured lawns of the estate, Luna stood at the edge of the herb garden, her hands scented with rosemary. She looked up at the glowing mansion in the dusk and whispered to herself, "One day, I'll build something of my own." High above in his office, Damian paused over a stack of papers, his eyes drifting toward the darkening sky. For a fleeting second, he felt a strange ache, a longing for something he had convinced himself he no longer needed. Neither of them knew that fate had already begun to weave their lives together, in ways that would break them, heal them, and change them forever. Autumn drifted gently through the Cross estate, carried on cool breezes tinged with the scent of dry leaves and firewood from the grand hearth in the main hall. Luna Bennett, with her gray apron tightly tied around her waist, moved through the vast corridors like part of the scenery, always present, never noticed. She wiped down the floor-to-ceiling windows, arranged fresh flowers in porcelain vases, and prepared coffee trays for Damian Cross's meetings, all with the care of someone who knew this job was her only ticket out of the past. But in rare quiet moments, while shelving books or sweeping the back courtyard, her heart slipped free from control, wandering to the man she only dared to admire from afar. Damian Cross was not an easy man to approach. He moved through the estate like a powerful gust, swift, decisive, and leaving a trail of tension in his wake. The staff whispered about him, a business genius, a man who tolerated no mistakes, someone who hadn't trusted anyone since his wife walked away. But Luna saw something else. She noticed him in the moments no one else did, like late at night when she cleaned the study and found him sitting at his desk, the dim lamp casting soft shadows on his face. He wasn't reading or working. He was just staring out the window, absently spinning an old Miles Davis CD, the label worn thin, The music played, slow and aching, like it was telling a story he could never put into words. One morning, as Luna left a tray of freshly baked butter cookies on the kitchen counter for the staff, she heard a familiar set of footsteps. Damien walked in, his gray suit perfectly pressed, though his eyes looked tired, like he hadn't slept. He stopped, looked at the cookies, and unexpectedly picked one up, taking a small bite. "Who made these?" he asked, voice deep but not harsh. Luna, who had been wiping the counter, startled, nearly dropping her cloth. I, I did, sir," she replied, eyes lowered to the floor. Damien gave a small nod, said nothing more, but before walking out, he glanced back at her, just a second longer than usual. "They're good," he said, then disappeared through the door. Luna's heart pounded, and she silently scolded herself for letting one tiny compliment rattle her so deeply. Moments like that, fleeting as they were, felt like stones dropped into Luna's still waters. Another time, while she was picking up a stack of scattered documents in the study, Damien walked in, not realizing she was there. He sat down, turned on the familiar jazz track, and murmured something about the old days. When Luna accidentally knocked over a book as she stood up, he looked up, momentarily surprised. "What are you doing here?" he asked, but his tone wasn't angry. "Just cleaning, sir," she said quickly, bending to retrieve the book. He studied her for a beat, then gestured to the CD on his desk. "You like jazz, miss?" He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Luna, sir." "Luna Bennett," she answered, cheeks burning. "And, I haven't heard much jazz." Damien nodded, saying nothing more. But as she left the room, she felt his gaze following her, like he'd just noticed she wasn't merely a shadow in the house. Those small interactions, brief as they were, nurtured something dangerous inside Luna. She began noticing Damien more. The way he ran his hand through his hair when stressed. The way he stood alone on the balcony during rainy nights, his shirt soaked but unfazed. She saw in him a familiar kind of loneliness, the kind she used to feel while lying in her tiny room, staring at the ceiling and wondering if anyone in the world would ever truly need her. But she also knew the line between them. He was Damien Cross, a man who could buy the world, and she was just Luna, an orphan with calloused hands and a journal full of silent dreams. One evening, while tidying up the study, Luna found the jazz CD tucked beneath a stack of papers. She picked it up, her fingers brushing over the faded words. "Kind of blue." She smiled faintly, imagining Damien listening to it in his quietest, most vulnerable moments. Without thinking, she slipped it into the pocket of her apron like a secret token. Later in her small room, she wrote in her journal, "He's not like they say. He's lonely like me. But who am I to think he'd ever see me?" She closed the book, reminding herself that this feeling was a path that led nowhere. Damien Cross lived in a world she could never belong to. But the heart, like the jazz that floated through his office late at night, never obeyed reason. And as autumn deepened, bringing sharper winds and longer shadows, Luna didn't know that those fleeting moments were leading her toward a night that would change everything. Autumn at the Cross estate had turned crisp and cool, the golden glow from the ballroom windows spilling soft light over the misty lawns. That night, the mansion dazzled more than ever, hosting an extravagant party for Damien Cross's business partners. Sleek cars lined the circular drive. Laughter mixed with the sound of violins filled the night air. Luna Bennett, dressed in a simple black dress provided for event staff, moved quietly through the crowd. Without her usual gray apron, she looked different, her brown hair loose around her shoulders, her blue eyes catching flashes of chandelier light. But she was still invisible among the wealthy guests. Luna's job was to keep everything flawless. Clear glasses, replace table linens, make sure no one noticed her. She was used to blending into the background, but tonight her heart felt heavier. She had just seen Damien, standing among the guests in a tailored black suit, a rare smile on his lips as he clinked glasses with an investor. He looked dangerously handsome, and Luna hated herself for not being able to look away. She turned back to cleaning a wine stain on the tablecloth when she overheard a nearby man laugh and say to Damien, "You need to loosen up, Cross. I know a place. I'll send someone over tonight." Damien smirked but didn't respond. Still, the comment sent a chill through Luna's chest. When the party ended and the guests trickled out, silence settled over the estate like a curtain. Luna stayed to clean, her footsteps light on the marble floor. She was polishing the last crystal glasses in the kitchen when she heard slow, heavy steps. Damien appeared in the doorway, his jacket gone, two buttons undone, dark hair tousled. He leaned against the frame, whiskey glass in hand, eyes glazed with drink. When he looked at Luna, it wasn't the gaze of an employer. It was distant, raw, filled with a hunger that came from somewhere hollow. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough and slurred. "They said someone would come." Luna froze, gripping her cleaning cloth tightly. "Sir, I'm Luna. I'm just cleaning," she said, her voice trembling. She backed away, heart pounding. Damien frowned, as if he hadn't heard. He stepped closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "Don't pretend," he murmured, voice a mix of dominance and pain. "My friend said he'd send someone. What do you want? Money? How much is one night worth?" His words cut like glass. Luna backed up until her spine hit the counter, her breath caught in her throat. "Mr. Cross, I'm not that kind of woman. I'm just a maid," she said, trying to steady her voice, though her heart was breaking. She wanted to run, to push him away, but his eyes, behind the blur of alcohol, held the same loneliness she'd seen before. When he listened to jazz in his study, when he stood on the balcony in the rain, the same loneliness she carried herself, writing in her journal late at night, wondering if anyone would ever truly need her. Damien stepped closer, the scent of cologne and whiskey overwhelming her. "Don't be afraid," he said, voice softer now, almost pleading. He reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers cold, his eyes burning. "I won't hurt you." Luna trembled. Her mind screamed to refuse, to walk away. She knew he was drunk, knew he didn't see her. Not Luna Bennett, just a body to soothe the ache. But her heart, the one that had quietly fallen for him through stolen glances, a compliment about cookies, a question about jazz. It betrayed her. She loved him, even knowing it was hopeless. And in that moment, when he looked at her as if she were everything, she wanted just once to be close to him, to feel love, even if it was an illusion. "Luna," Damien whispered, like he was saying her name for the first time. He pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers, urgent, desperate. Luna didn't resist. She closed her eyes and let herself be swept away in her first kiss, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The kiss carried all the love she had hidden, all the heartbreak of a girl who knew this moment would never truly belong to her. Damien led her to the master bedroom, where moonlight filtered through white curtains, painting silver across the bed. He undressed her slowly, possessive yet strangely gentle. Luna shivered beneath each touch, her body torn between fear and yearning. When he whispered her name, she didn't know if he meant her or someone else, but she didn't care. Just once, she wanted to belong to him, even if only in moonlight. When it was over, Luna lay beside him, body aching, heart shattered. Damien had fallen asleep, his face peaceful, just a man, not a cold CEO. She studied him, trying to memorize everything, his face in the moonlight, his steady breathing, the warmth beside her. Her tears came not just for what she had given him, but for knowing the dream would vanish with dawn. Exhausted, she closed her eyes and drifted into sleep beside him, too broken to walk away. Morning came with a pale light seeping through the curtains, waking Luna. She stirred, body sore, heart heavy. Damien was already awake, sitting up in bed, hair tousled, his gray eyes cold as he looked at her. A smirk curved his lips. "You're still here?" he said, voice low and sharp. "Don't think one night in my bed means anything." Luna froze, her heart stopping. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Damien didn't even look at her as he grabbed his phone from the nightstand and scrolled through his messages like she didn't exist. Then, without looking up, he added, "How much do you want?" "Just say it. I don't play these games." His words were a storm, tearing through what little she had left. Her blood turned to ice, each breath a struggle. Last night she had given herself to him, not for money, not for gain, but for love. A love she knew had no future. And now he saw her as a transaction, a cheap exchange. The pain was deeper than anything she had ever known. She didn't cry, not out of strength, but because the pain went beyond tears. Luna quietly rose, slipping back into her crumpled black dress, her hands shaking as she fastened each button. Damien glanced at her, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, but no remorse. "I'll leave," she said, voice small but firm. "Thank you for everything." She walked out, every step like her world was collapsing beneath her. Damien didn't stop her, just stood there, watching her fragile silhouette disappear through the door. A strange discomfort stirred in him, but he brushed it off. To him, she was just a girl, a passing moment. Luna returned to her small servant's room, sat on the narrow bed, and clutched her pillow as the tears finally fell. The pain of losing her first time mingled with the shame of being seen as someone who sold herself. She couldn't stay, not here, not after this. She picked up a piece of paper and wrote, "Dear Mr. Cross, I resign effective today. Thank you for the opportunity. Luna Bennett." She left the letter on the kitchen counter where the housekeeper would find it, then packed her things into her old suitcase. Before leaving the estate, she stood at the gate, looking back at the place that had given her both hope and heartbreak. Her eyes lingered on the window of Damien's room, where a faint light still glowed. "Goodbye, Damien," she whispered. Then she stepped into the early morning fog, unaware that this night hadn't just changed her, but had also set the course for a destiny neither of them could escape. 3 years had passed since Luna Bennett left the Cross estate. The small town of Willow Creek, nestled beside a lazy river in New England, had become her sanctuary. Cobblestone streets, white-painted wooden houses, and wildflower fields stretching to the horizon offered her a peace she had never known in the city. Here no one knew her past. No one asked about the man she sometimes glimpsed in her son Leo's eyes. Willow Creek was where Luna rebuilt her life, not for herself, but for the 3-year-old boy who had become her entire world. Luna arrived in Willow Creek pregnant, carrying nothing but an old suitcase and a few $100s saved from her time at the estate. Martha, an elderly woman with silver hair and a warm smile, welcomed her into Sweet Haven, the town's cozy bakery on Main Street. "You need a place to start over, don't you?" Martha had said, handing Luna an apron and a job frosting cakes. She also introduced her to a kind landlord who rented Luna a small upstairs apartment in a wooden house, something she could just afford. From there, Luna learned how to knead dough, bake fresh bread, and swirl icing on cupcakes. Each day was a step away from what she had left behind. Leo, Luna's son, was the light in her darkest days. With thick black hair and sparkling gray eyes, he looked so much like Damien Cross that it sometimes startled her. A small teardrop-shaped birthmark behind his ear, visible only when she brushed his hair, was a silent reminder of the father he had never met. But Leo wasn't just Damien's reflection. He had a brilliant smile, endless curiosity, and dreams of becoming an astronaut. "Mom, I'm going to the moon!" he'd shout, waving a plastic stick like a sword, while Luna laughed and pulled him into her arms. When he asked about his dad, she'd smile softly and say, "You have me, and I love you more than the whole universe. That's enough, right?" Leo, in his innocent way, would nod and run off to draw another picture of his astronaut hero. Luna's life in Willow Creek was simple, but not easy. Raising a child alone at 25 was a challenge, especially without any family to lean on. Her bakery wages barely covered rent, food, and Leo's preschool tuition, with little left over. Some nights after Leo had fallen asleep, she'd sit at the small kitchen table, poring over bills beneath a dim light, her heart heavy with worry. But she never complained. Her joy came from the little things: Leo's laughter while they played backyard baseball, the smell of freshly baked cookies, or bedtime stories told under a desk lamp, her voice soft as she described flying dinosaurs and moon adventures. Sweet Haven gave Luna a sense of purpose. She loved the feel of flour on her hands, the way loaves puffed golden in the oven, and the smiles on customers' faces when they praised her apple pie. Martha became like a mother to her, always ready to listen, even if Luna rarely spoke of the past. Only once did she open up, when Martha gently asked about Leo's father. Luna looked out the window, her eyes distant. "He's not a bad man," she whispered, "but he doesn't belong to us." Martha didn't pry. She simply rested a hand on Luna's shoulder, offering silent comfort. Despite building a new life, Luna couldn't fully escape Damien's shadow. Sometimes when Leo tilted his head just so, while throwing a baseball, or when he laughed with that same gleam in his eyes, Damien's image would flash through her mind. The man on the balcony in the rain, who had unknowingly stolen her heart. She wondered if he ever thought of her, even once. But then she would shake the thought away, tucking it deep inside. She was no longer the wide-eyed girl at the Cross estate. She was Leo's mother, a woman who had learned to stand on her own, even if that strength came solely from the love she had for her child. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over Willow Creek as it dipped behind the distant hills. Sweet Haven Bakery, with its rustic carved wooden sign, exuded the warm scent of butter cookies and fresh apple pie, luring passers-by in like a spell. Behind the counter stood Luna Bennett, now 25, her short brown hair tucked neatly behind her ears, her white apron dusted with flour. 3 years in this town had changed her. No longer the timid maid from the Cross estate, she now carried herself with quiet confidence, though her blue eyes still held a trace of guarded sorrow. She smiled warmly as she wrapped a box of cookies for an elderly customer, but her thoughts were with Leo, her 3-year-old son, who was drawing superheroes in the play corner. The bell over the door jingled, and Luna looked up, ready to greet a new customer. But when the man stepped inside, her smile froze, as if time itself stopped. Damien Cross stood there, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his dark hair slicked back, his sharp gray eyes scanning the bakery like he was assessing a new investment. He was tall, commanding, exactly as she remembered, the man who had once shattered her heart. But there was something different now. Faint lines near his eyes, a weariness in his expression she hadn't seen before. Luna dropped her gaze immediately, pretending to wipe the counter, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the rag. She prayed he wouldn't recognize her, prayed he'd just buy something and leave. Damien hadn't come to Willow Creek looking for Luna. Cross Enterprises was scouting land along the river to build a luxury resort, and he was there to survey a nearby property. Sweet Haven had simply caught his attention, a moment of indulgence drawn in by the smell of butter cookies. He stood at the counter, eyes skimming the trays of pastries, but his attention lingered on Luna. Something about her, the softness in her voice as she greeted another customer, the flicker of blue in her eyes, struck a chord of vague familiarity. But he couldn't place it. 3 years ago, Luna had been just another maid at his estate, a nameless shadow he'd barely noticed. But this woman, with her short hair, flour-covered apron, and steady presence, felt entirely new. "A loaf of barley bread," Damien said, his deep voice firm, eyes still on the display. "Make it quick." Luna nodded, avoiding his gaze. She reached for the loaf with icy hands, wrapped it in brown paper, and forced her voice to stay calm. "Here you go, sir," she murmured, barely above a whisper. She slid the package across the counter, avoiding his eyes, heart pounding so loud she feared he might hear it. Damien took the bag, dropped a few coins on the counter, and turned toward the door. But then a small voice called out from the corner, stopping him in his tracks. "Mommy, I finished my drawing." Leo, in a cozy blue sweater, ran out of the play area, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. He had tousled black hair, sparkling gray eyes, and a beaming smile. "Look, I drew you, me, and a spaceship." Luna knelt and wrapped her arms around him, forcing a smile despite the knot in her chest. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice strained. She could feel Damien's stare from across the room. She rose slowly, shielding Leo behind her as she faced him. Damien stood frozen, a to-go coffee cup forgotten in his hand. He looked at Leo and felt a strange, disorienting sensation, like staring at an old photo of himself as a child. The gray eyes, the lopsided smile. And when Leo turned his head, a small teardrop-shaped birthmark behind his ear peeked out from beneath his hair. Damien's hand instinctively touched the same spot behind his own ear. An identical mark. His heart slammed against his chest. A vague suspicion took root, terrifying in its clarity. He shifted his gaze to Luna, for the first time truly seeing her. The woman from the library, the maid who baked the cookies, Who whispered to him about jazz? It was her, Luna Bennett. Luna, he said hoarsely, barely believing his eyes. Luna straightened, her expression cool and unreadable. There was no trace of the girl who once loved him in silence. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cross," she said, voice flat and distant. "Can I help you with anything else?" Her words were a slap. The way she said Mr. Cross, the wall in her eyes, it left Damien speechless. He wanted to say something, to ask her why she was here, why she had disappeared. But then he looked again at Leo, and his voice failed him. "Leo, go play with Miss Martha for a little bit, okay, honey?" Luna said gently. She handed the boy to Martha, who had just stepped out from the kitchen, then turned back to Damien. "If you're not buying anything else, please leave. I have work to do." Damien stepped closer to the counter, his voice low and urgent. "Luna, we need to talk. I didn't know you were here. I didn't even know—" He stopped himself. His gaze flicked again toward Leo. The possibility rattled him. Luna let out a hollow laugh, sharp and humorless. "Talk?" she echoed bitterly. "You don't remember, Mr. Cross? I was just a mistake from a drunken night. There's nothing left to say." Her words cut him clean. He remembered that night. Whiskey, grief, her eyes as she left. He remembered the cruel things he'd said. And now seeing her here, a woman strong, independent, yet carrying invisible scars, he felt something deeper than regret. His eyes drifted to the child again. That thought, could it be? "Don't," Luna said coldly. "Don't ask questions you have no right to ask. You had everything you wanted 3 years ago. Now please, leave us alone." Damien wanted to argue, wanted to beg her to stay, but her eyes, so full of hurt, stopped him. He turned, walked out of the bakery, each step heavier than the last. When the door shut behind him, he paused on the sidewalk, looking back through the window. Inside, Luna knelt to hug Leo, her smile warm and full of love. And for the first time in years, Damien felt something he didn't recognize. Fear. Fear that he had missed something precious and might never get it back. Under the gray skies of Willow Creek, Damien Cross sat in a temporary office near the resort development site, the desk lamp casting a stark light across his tense face. The small room, with its plain wooden desk and the lingering scent of stale coffee, was a sharp contrast to his luxurious office back in the city. In front of him lay a thin stack of documents, yet every page felt like a dagger cutting deep into his heart. After the unexpected encounter at Sweet Haven Bakery, Damien had hired a private investigator, swiftly and discreetly, to look into Luna Bennett and the boy named Leo. Now, just 3 days later, the truth was in front of him, clear and undeniable. The report was concise. Luna Bennett, 25 years old, had lived in Willow Creek for 3 years and worked at Sweet Haven Bakery. She lived alone with her son, Leo Bennett, 3 years old, born on August 15th at a small hospital on the outskirts of town. No father's name was listed on the birth certificate, but the detail that made Damien stop breathing was Leo's medical record. Blood type AB negative, a rare type, identical to his own. Then he opened the attached photograph, taken from a distance, showing a teardrop-shaped birthmark behind Leo's ear, exactly like his own. Damien closed the file, his hands trembling, knuckles white. There was no need for a DNA test. Leo was his son. Damien stood and walked to the window, gazing down the road leading to the town center, where the lights of Sweet Haven glowed warmly. Images of Leo, those sparkling gray eyes, the crooked smile, the way he waved his arms while talking about spaceships, filled Damien's mind, vivid like memories from his own childhood. And Luna, the woman he once regarded as invisible, had raised their child alone, without a single complaint, without once seeking him out. That truth hit like a storm, tearing apart the armor he had built around himself, the invincible billionaire who believed everything could be bought. He sat down, buried his face in his hands, and his mind rewound to that night 3 years ago. He remembered the whiskey, a friend's teasing comment about company, and Luna's eyes, frightened yet filled with compassion, when he mistook her for someone else. He remembered the cruel words he'd said the next morning as she quietly left. Don't think one night gives you any right to ask anything from me. He'd thought she didn't matter, just a fleeting moment in a drunken haze. But now her pained expression at the bakery, the strength in her voice when she defended Leo, haunted him like a curse he couldn't escape. One afternoon, Damien returned to Sweet Haven, not for pastries, but to find Martha, the owner. In the back kitchen, surrounded by the scent of flour and vanilla, he asked about Luna, keeping his voice steady though his heart pounded. "She's a strong girl," Martha said, pride gleaming in her eyes. "Came here with nothing but the clothes on her back, pregnant, and never asked anyone for help. She lives for Leo, and that boy is her whole world." She paused, watching Damien as if she wanted to say more, but only smiled. "She deserves to be happy, you know." Martha's words struck him like a blow. Damien left the bakery, walking along the cobbled street, heavy with guilt. He thought of an old keepsake, a kind of Blue Miles Davis CD he once saw Luna holding in the library. Back at the hotel, he rummaged through his suitcase and found it, the label worn, but still carrying memories of nights when he let his true self show. He played the music, letting the melancholic jazz fill the room. And for the first time in years, Damien felt small. He had been wrong. Wrong to treat everything like a transaction, wrong to abandon Luna, and wrong to let his son grow up without a father. In the days that followed, Damien watched Luna and Leo from a distance, unable to approach. He stood outside the bakery in the early mornings, watching her walk Leo to daycare, the boy skipping beside her, clutching a superhero drawing. He saw her smile at her son, a tender smile he had never seen when she worked at his estate. He went to the daycare playground and watched Leo chase his friends, laughter echoing, and each time he saw the boy's face, Damien's heart ached. He wanted to run to him, to hold him, and say, "I'm your father." But he couldn't, not because he feared Luna's rejection, but because he knew he hadn't earned the right. Damien began to take action, but carefully. He contacted the hospital where Leo was born, using his connections to access old records. The report confirmed Luna had gone into early labor, spent 2 weeks in the hospital due to exhaustion, with no one by her side. The image of her, young, scared, holding their baby in a cold hospital room, made it hard to breathe. He called his assistant and ordered pastries from Sweet Haven for company meetings, a quiet way to support Luna without raising suspicion. He sent a small bicycle for Leo through Martha, saying it was from a loyal customer. Each night, Damien sat in his hotel room, staring at the photograph the investigator had sent. Luna and Leo walking by the river, the boy holding a wildflower smiling up at his mother. Damien wrote a letter of apology, but tore it up after just a few lines. Words weren't enough. He had to prove, through actions, through time, that he was no longer the man who had pushed her out of his life. He looked out the window, the bakery lights glowing like a distant beacon, and whispered, "I won't lose the two of you again." Damien knew his path to redemption had just begun. Luna didn't believe him. The cold look in her eyes made that clear. But he wouldn't give up. Not for Leo, not for Luna, and not for the man he was trying to become, for the first time in his life, a good man. Winter had draped Willow Creek in a soft layer of snow, glistening like powdered sugar under the lanterns of the town's annual winter fair. The cobbled streets of the small New England town transformed into a vibrant painting of handmade stalls, the warm scent of gingerbread, and steaming cups of hot apple cider. Children's laughter mingled with folk music from a local band, creating a cozy atmosphere amid the biting December cold. Luna Bennett, Damien Cross, and little Leo walked into the fair, a scene Luna could not have imagined just weeks ago. In the past few weeks, Damien had slowly built trust. He frequently stopped by Sweet Haven Bakery, placed company orders, chatted with Martha, and found gentle ways to talk to Luna. At first, she responded curtly, but his sincerity gradually softened her guard. He once helped Leo retrieve a runaway baseball and sent him a picture book about astronauts through Martha, prompting Leo to squeal, "Mom, the man from the bakery knew I loved space." Despite her caution, Luna saw how much Leo liked Damien, and the man never crossed a line. When Damien suggested they attend the winter fair together, Luna hesitated, but agreed after Martha vouched for him, though she warned, "I'll be close to Leo at all times." At the fair, Leo, bundled in a blue coat, skipped between Luna and Damien, his gray eyes sparkling as he gazed at the glowing lanterns. Luna held his hand tightly, never looking away, while Damien walked beside them, smiling as Leo dragged them toward the ring toss booth. The boy cheered when he won a stuffed bear, then burst into laughter as Damien bought him a cotton candy nearly the size of his face. "Mr. Damien, this is huge!" Leo shouted, sugar on his mouth. Luna stood nearby, hands in her coat pockets, a fleeting smile on her lips at Leo's joy, but her eyes stayed watchful, as if measuring every moment. They stopped at a booth selling hot apple cider. Damien waited in line to buy 3 cups. Leo, standing beside Luna, spotted a colorful ice cream cart a few yards away, its roof decorated with bright balloons. "Mom, I want a balloon," he said, tugging her hand. Luna held his hand firmly and smiled. "We'll get one later, sweetheart." Just then, her phone rang. Martha, urgent on the line. "Luna, the oven at the shop broke. Smoke everywhere. I need you here right now." Luna hesitated, glancing at Leo clutching his bear, eyes full of joy. She wanted to take him with her, but he pouted. "I don't want to leave. The fair is so fun." Damien returned with the cider, overhearing the exchange. "Luna, I can watch Leo for an hour," he said sincerely. "I'll keep him safe, and you can come back once things are under control." Luna shook her head, but Leo tugged her hand, eyes pleading. "Mom, I want to stay with Mr. Damien." She looked into her son's eyes, then into Damien's, his gaze unwavering. After a tense pause, she finally nodded, reluctant. "1 hour," she said firmly, "and don't let him out of your sight." Luna hurried back to the bakery, heart uneasy but believing Damien would keep Leo safe. Damien held Leo's hand, guiding him through the stalls, trying to keep him entertained to ward off any tension. But when they stopped at a game booth, Damien was approached by a business associate from the resort project. "Cross, we need to talk about that land contract," the man said enthusiastically. Damien glanced at Leo, who was tossing balls with a game attendant. He nodded, thinking it would only take a minute. But in the moment Damien turned away, Leo spotted a red balloon drifting through the crowd and chased after it, slipping away from the booth. "Leo!" Damien shouted when he realized the boy was gone. He tore through the crowd, eyes scanning faces, strangers, other children, but no sign of Leo. The fair's cheerful music became chaotic noise. He asked a vendor, a couple, but no one had seen a boy in a blue coat. His heart pounded, fear gripping him. He called Luna, his voice trembling. "Luna, Leo's missing. I'm looking, but please come now." Back at the bakery, Luna had just fixed the oven when the call came. Hearing Damien's voice, she dropped her tools, face going pale. She sprinted out into the snowy streets toward the fair, panic clawing at her chest. When she arrived, she found Damien in the crowd, hair tousled, eyes wild. "Luna, I'm so sorry," he stammered. "I looked away for just a minute." She didn't hear him. She ran between booths, shouting Leo's name until her voice went raw. Leo was her entire world. The thought of losing him made it hard to breathe. Finally, she heard soft crying near the parking lot. She dashed toward the sound and saw a drunken man gripping Leo's arm, mumbling, "My grandson, where'd you run off to?" The man's eyes, glassy from alcohol, had mistaken Leo for his own grandchild. "Let go of my son!" Luna screamed, charging forward. The man startled and released Leo, stumbling backward. Damien appeared and punched the man hard in the jaw, sending him sprawling into the snow. He scooped Leo up, checking him quickly, then turned the drunk over to fair security. Luna pulled Leo into her arms, holding him tight as tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't say anything, just shook her head, her eyes full of pain as she looked at Damien, as if asking why he didn't keep his promise. Leo sobbed, clinging to his mother. Damien stood frozen, his hand bleeding from a scrape, wanting to explain. But Luna's eyes silenced him. She hugged Leo and walked away, stepping through the snow toward the fair's exit. A local reporter there to cover the fair recognized Damien from articles about the resort project. He'd witnessed the altercation, snapped a photo of Damien with Luna and Leo, and jotted down notes. After that night, Luna became even more distant. She didn't respond when Damien visited the bakery. Her eyes, once cautious, now looked shattered. Damien felt the looming fear of losing her and Leo forever, a pain deeper than any business failure. 10 days later, following town gossip and public records, the reporter published a front-page article in the local paper. CEO Damian Cross has a secret child in Willow Creek? Luna saw the headline on her phone, her heart heavy. She didn't want Leo caught in a media storm. She knew then. She couldn't stay. She packed only what was necessary and left a short note for Martha. Thank you for giving me a home. I'm sorry for leaving so suddenly. Luna? She told no one where she was going, not even Damien. That night she boarded a bus with Leo asleep on her chest. As the vehicle pulled away from Willow Creek, she looked out the window, silent tears falling. She didn't hate Damien, but she couldn't let his world of power and headlines destroy Leo's peace. Back in his rented house, Damien read the article with empty eyes. The company didn't matter. The headlines didn't matter. He only wanted Luna and Leo. When he went to the bakery and Martha handed him Luna's note, his heart seized. Just a few lines, but they cut deeper than any loss. Thank you for giving me a home. I'm sorry for leaving so suddenly. Luna? Damien gripped the letter, knowing that if he wanted to find them, he had to change, not just with words, but with his entire being. He swore to find Luna and Leo, not to force them back, but to prove that he had become the man worthy of them. The first spring rain poured down over Pine Hollow, a small town nestled among the pine forests of New England, soaking the dirt roads and tapping steadily on the wooden roof of the modest cottage Luna Bennett now rented. The little house, with its narrow porch and tiny vegetable garden, had become the place where Luna and Leo began again after leaving Willow Creek. Luna worked at a local cafe, making lattes and baking bread, while Leo adjusted to his new preschool, drawing spaceships on sheets of paper. But despite her efforts to build a new home, Luna couldn't shake the emptiness that lingered in her heart. The article about the billionaire's secret child and the memory of the winter fair, where she almost lost Leo, still haunted her every night. One evening, as heavy rain fell, Luna sat by the window, watching water stream down the glass. Leo was asleep in his room, hugging the stuffed bear from the fair. Her thoughts wandered to Damien, not the cold man who had once hurt her, but the one who had patiently shown up at the bakery, who had punched a drunken man to protect Leo. She wondered if she had left too quickly, if she should have given him a chance to explain, but fear of being hurt again made her shake her head and hold her cooling mug of tea tighter. A sudden knock at the door startled her. With Leo asleep, she rose, threw on a sweater, and opened the door. Damian Cross stood there, drenched in the downpour, his white shirt clinging to his body, black hair plastered to his forehead. His gray eyes burned with a determination she had never seen before. He held no umbrella, rain pouring down his face, but he stood still as if the cold meant nothing. "Luna," he said, voice hoarse but steady, "I need to talk. Just 5 minutes." Luna froze, heart pounding. She wanted to shut the door, to push him out of her life again, but his eyes, sincere and almost pleading, made her hesitate. She crossed her arms, her voice icy. "Mr. Cross, how did you find me? And what do you want now?" Damien stepped onto the porch, letting the rain soak him, making no move to intrude on her space. "I hired someone to find you," he admitted plainly, "but I'm not here to force anything. I'm here to apologize, to beg for your forgiveness." Luna shook her head, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, though she held them back. "Apologies don't change anything, Damien. You had your chance 3 years ago, and you chose to hurt me." Damien lowered his head, fists clenched at his sides, rain dripping from his hair onto the wooden floor. "I know," he said, voice deep and pained. "I was wrong to think everything could be bought. Love, trust, even people. I was wrong not to see your worth, to walk away from you and Leo. Since the day you left the estate, I've felt like I've been walking through life without truly living. And when I learned about Leo, I realized I'd lost the most precious thing I ever had." He looked up, eyes locking with hers. "I don't want to drag you into my world, Luna. I want to be part of yours. Taking Leo to preschool, sitting with you in this house, listening to you talk about your cafe shifts. I want to be the man who knows how to love, not the billionaire you once knew." His words were like spring wind, slipping through the walls Luna had built around her heart. She looked at him, soaked, shivering from the cold, yet steady in his gaze. He didn't kneel, didn't make grand promises, just stood there with a sincerity that cut deep. She remembered how he played with Leo, how he dove into the crowd to find him at the fair, and the pain in his eyes when she left Willow Creek. "Damien," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm scared. Scared you'll hurt me again. Scared for Leo." Damien stepped closer but stopped a step short, respecting her space. "I swear, Luna," he said softly but firmly, "I will never hurt you or Leo again. Give me a chance, not to fix the past, but to prove I can be the man you need." She looked into his eyes and saw the truth she had longed for 3 years ago. Her tears finally fell, blending with the rain. She stepped onto the porch, letting it soak her sweater, and stood before him. "Okay," she whispered, voice soft but resolute, "but if you hurt me or Leo again, I'll never forgive you." Damien smiled, the first real smile Luna had ever seen from him, not the polished smile of a CEO, but of a man who'd found hope. He reached out, gently touching her shoulder as if afraid she might vanish. "Thank you, Luna," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. She nodded, allowing him to pull her into a gentle embrace as rain poured around them, washing away old pain. Luna led Damien inside, handing him a towel to dry off. Leo still slept soundly, unaware his parents had just found their way back to each other. Damien sat at the kitchen table, taking in the modest home with reverent eyes. "I'm staying in Pine Hollow," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm worthy of you and Leo." Luna looked at him, a small smile blooming, one that, for the first time, wasn't touched by sorrow. "Then start now, Damien," she said. "Be the man I can believe in." That night, they sat at the kitchen table, talking about small things. Leo, the cafe, the rainy days in Pine Hollow. Beneath the warm light, Luna felt a flicker of hope that maybe this time she had placed her trust in the right person. Spring in Pine Hollow arrived with gentle breezes that swept through the pine forests and rustled the wildflowers in the small garden behind Luna Bennett's wooden cottage. The house, with its narrow porch and floral curtains, was no longer just a shelter for Luna and Leo. It had become a place where Damien Cross was learning how to be part of a family. Ever since that rainy night when Luna gave him a second chance, Damien had rented a small apartment just a few blocks from the cafe where Luna worked, determined to prove he was no longer the cold man who once hurt her. Every morning, Luna and Damien worked side by side at Pine Brew Cafe, a cozy space filled with wooden tables and the rich aroma of roasted coffee. Luna, wearing a green apron, made lattes and baked bread, while Damien, once accustomed to luxury boardrooms, learned to operate the espresso machine and take customer orders. He was clumsy, spilling milk, mixing up names, but every time Luna laughed and wiped coffee off his hand, he felt closer to her world. "You're a CEO and still can't beat this machine?" she teased, eyes sparkling. Damien grinned and kissed her forehead. "Because now, all I want is to do things right, for you and Leo." In the afternoons, they picked up Leo from preschool together. The nearly 4-year-old boy would run to the gate, shouting joyfully at the sight of his mom and Mr. Damien. Damien often carried Leo on his shoulders, letting him point out birds in the sky, while Luna held Damien's hand and shared funny customer stories from the cafe. At home, they cooked dinner together, usually Leo's favorite spaghetti, and spent the evenings building block towers or drawing. Leo, with his wild imagination, once drew the three of them on a spaceship, making Luna and Damien exchange warm, knowing glances. But their journey wasn't without struggles. Luna still had days of doubt when memories of the Cross estate resurfaced. One night, after Leo had gone to sleep, she sat on the porch watching the soft drizzle and asked Damien, "Are you sure, Damien? This life, small house, cafe shifts, no mansion or power, is enough for you?" Damien sat beside her, took her hand gently. "Luna, I once had everything, and I was never truly happy. You and Leo, you're my whole world now." She looked into his eyes, saw sincerity, but she still needed time to fully believe it. Damien also had to learn how to be a father. Though Leo adored him, the boy sometimes asked questions that caught him off guard. "Mr. Damien, why didn't you live with me and Mommy before?" Leo asked once, clutching a wooden block. After a pause, Damien replied, "I got lost, Leo, but now I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He taught Leo how to throw a baseball in the backyard, patiently showing him each movement. When Leo finally hit the target, he ran into Damien's arms, shouting, "Mr. Damien, I did it!" Damien, eyes stinging, held him tight, feeling for the first time what it meant to be a father. To show his transformation, Damien started with the practical. He helped Luna fix the garden fence, repaint the porch, and even tried baking with her, though he usually ended up covered in flour. He turned down a major Cross Enterprises deal to stay in Pine Hollow, delegating control to his city team. Inspired by Luna's journey, he also launched a small charity project, Haven of Hope, to support single mothers and orphans. "I don't want anyone to feel as alone as you once did," he told her. And for the first time, Luna hugged him without hesitation. Their greatest test came when Leo caught a cold and ran a high fever through the night. Luna and Damien stayed up, taking turns checking his temperature and placing cool cloths on his forehead. When Leo finally woke, weak but smiling, calling for Mommy and Mr. Damien, Luna looked at Damien and saw the worry and love in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, for the first time using his name without a barrier. Damien kissed the top of her head, relief washing over him. One spring afternoon, Damien organized a small picnic in the backyard with Luna's homemade bread and fresh apple juice. Leo ran through the garden chasing butterflies while Luna and Damien sat on a blanket, watching him. "Do you think we'll be okay?" Luna asked softly. Damien took her hand, his gaze steady. "We'll be okay, Luna, because we have each other." That night, after Leo fell asleep, Luna and Damien sat on the porch, gazing at the stars shining through the pines. She leaned on his shoulder, feeling safe for the first time in years. "I used to think I'd never trust anyone again," she said. "But you're changing that." Damien smiled, pulling her closer. "And I won't stop trying, Luna. Not as long as it's for you and Leo." Under the starlight, they both knew their family wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on simple things: spaghetti dinners, baseball throws, and embraces in the rain. The kind of moments that made up true happiness. Summer arrived in Pine Hollow, bathing the small New England town in a soft golden light that made the pine forest glisten and the garden behind Luna Bennett's wooden cottage bloom with wildflowers. The house, with its freshly painted porch and floral curtains, had become the heart of a growing family. Luna, Damien Cross, and nearly 4-year-old Leo had found their own rhythm. Mornings brewing coffee, afternoons tossing baseballs, and evenings filled with bedtime stories under warm lights. After months of Damien patiently proving his love, Luna finally felt her heart open, no longer trapped by the fear of her past. One June afternoon, with sunlight filtering through the pine branches, Damien led Luna and Leo into the backyard, saying he had a surprise. Leo, brandishing a plastic stick like a space sword, squealed with delight when he saw the far corner of the garden, decorated with paper lanterns and a blanket spread out on the grass, topped with Luna's homemade bread and apple cider. Luna smiled, thinking it was just a family picnic, until Damien dropped to one knee, and her heart skipped a beat. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a silver ring engraved with daisies, simple yet elegant, like the flowers she loved in her garden. "Luna," he said, his voice steady and deep, "you gave me a chance to make things right. I can't promise you the whole world, but I promise to spend my life loving and protecting you and Leo. Will you marry me?" Luna covered her mouth, eyes shimmering with tears. Leo, standing beside them, jumped up and shouted, "Mom, marry Mr. Damien. I want him to be my dad." Luna laughed through her tears, knelt before Damien, and embraced him. "Yes, Damien," she whispered, "I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her softly as Leo dove between them, knocking all three onto the blanket in a burst of laughter under the golden light. The wedding took place a few weeks later, right there in the backyard. It wasn't extravagant, just a few close friends, Martha from Willow Creek, co-workers from Pine Brew, and neighbors from Pine Hollow. But it overflowed with love. Luna wore a simple white dress that fell to her ankles, her brown hair loose with a crown of daisies. Damien, in a light gray suit, stood beneath a wooden arch he had built himself, eyes never leaving her. Leo, in a tiny vest, proudly tossed rose petals from a basket, grinning as he shouted, Mom married Dad. They exchanged vows under the setting sun. Luna, her voice trembling with emotion, said, Damien, you gave me a family. I promise to stand by you through everything. Damien took her hands, eyes sincere. Luna, you are my light. I promise to love and cherish you every day of my life. They exchanged silver rings and kissed under the golden sky, surrounded by applause and laughter. The reception was simple but warm. Cupcakes baked by Luna and Damien, apple cider in mason jars, and soft violin music from a neighbor. Leo ran through the garden with his friends, laughter echoing in the air. Damien never let go of Luna's hand, pulling her into a slow dance on the grass and whispering, Thank you for giving me a home. Luna leaned into his chest, smiling. Thank you for becoming mine. That night, Damien carried a sleepy Leo back inside, while Luna walked beside him. They stood by Leo's bed, watching him sleep under the soft glow of the lamp, the stuffed bear from the fair still clutched in his arms. Damien wrapped his arms around Luna from behind and whispered, I never thought I could be this happy. She turned to him, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. Neither did I, Damien. In the months that followed, they embraced their simple life. Luna opened a small bakery, Pine Blossom, right beside the cafe, selling cookies and apple pies. Damien painted walls and hauled flour, always close by. He continued his work with Haven of Hope, supporting single mothers and orphans, often bringing Luna and Leo to events so they could see the heart behind his work. Leo, now calling Damien Dad, started asking about camping trips and the puppy he'd always dreamed of. Under the summer moonlight, Luna and Damien sat on the porch, gazing at the stars through the pine canopy. They talked about the future, not grand dreams, but simple things, a beach trip, a bigger garden, and maybe someday a sibling for Leo. We don't need everything, Luna said, her hand laced in his. Just the right people. Damien smiled, pulling her into his arms. And I've already found mine. Beneath the pine hollow stars, they knew their happiness didn't come from perfection, but from the little things. Leo's laughter, embraces in the kitchen, and a love that had weathered pain to finally find its home. It was real and they would cherish it, one day at a time. Do you believe in love overcoming pain like Luna and Damien? Comment below and follow the channel to see more inspiring stories like this. Chapter 1, A Kiss from a Game. Manhattan, New York shimmered under 1,000 lights. A towering glass building in Midtown had been transformed into a stage for tonight's charity gala, where the elite gathered to showcase their generosity, or at least pretend to. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected off marble floors, the clink of wine glasses mingling with polite laughter. Cassie Monroe, 28, stood behind the temporary bar, hands swiftly mixing a martini. Her tight black uniform made her look sharp, but the tiny silver guitar pendant peeking from beneath her collar hinted at her true self. Cassie didn't belong here. She was a self-taught musician, scraping by on-side gigs to afford recording equipment. By day, she played acoustic guitar in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, writing rustic folk songs and uploading videos to YouTube. A few thousand followers tuned in, but the dream of performing on a big stage still felt far away. Tonight, all she wanted was to finish her shift, collect her tips, and go home to her guitar. Cassie, hurry up! That real estate mogul's waiting for his third drink, whispered Lena, a fellow bartender, nodding toward an impatient middle-aged man. Cassie smiled and slid the martini across the counter. She was used to the fast pace of events like this, polite smiles avoiding the curious gazes of the guests. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the sip of wine she'd had during break, or maybe it was the glint in Lena's eyes, like she was about to stir up trouble. As the crowd thinned, Lena pulled Cassie and two other co-workers, Miguel and Tara, into a shadowed corner behind the bar. We need a little fun, Lena declared, raising a bottle of Prosecco she'd borrowed from storage. Let's play Truth or Dare. Whoever refuses drinks the whole glass. Cassie rolled her eyes but couldn't resist Lena's mischievous grin. She took another sip of Prosecco, warmth spreading through her. All right, but keep it tame, she said. The first round flew by. Miguel picked Truth and admitted to faking sick to skip work. Tara picked Dare and danced a ridiculous jig on the floor. When it was Cassie's turn, Lena arched an eyebrow. Truth or Dare, girl? Cassie hesitated. She didn't like talking about herself. the past, the unfinished songs, or the dreams she kept buried. Dare, she said, voice trembling slightly from the alcohol. Lena grinned wickedly. Kiss a stranger in the room. Anyone you want, but it has to be the most unapproachable one. Miguel whistled. Tara covered her mouth, giggling. Cassie blushed, her heart thudding. You guys are insane, she muttered. But Lena's stare told her there was no backing out. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and scanned the room. Tuxedos and ball gowns floated past, but one figure drew her attention. He stood alone near the window, back straight, eyes distant, dark brown hair, a perfectly tailored black suit, and a face so cold it seemed nothing in this world could touch him. Him, Cassie whispered, pointing. Lena squinted. Oh, Cassie, that's Julian Hayes, tech CEO, ultra-rich, ultra-private. Kiss him? Good luck. Cassie swallowed hard, but the Prosecco and peer pressure pushed her forward. The crowd blurred, her heartbeat roared in her ears. Julian Hayes stood silently, holding a glass of whiskey, eyes fixed on the city beyond. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered, but there was something lonely in the way he stood. Cassie stopped a step away. Excuse me, she said, voice shaky. Julian turned. His deep blue eyes met hers, unreadable. She didn't think, she just moved. Rising on her toes, she placed a hand on his shoulder and kissed him. His lips were cool, laced with whiskey, yet unexpectedly soft. The kiss lasted only 3 seconds, but it scrambled her breath. She pulled away, face flushed, her shirt shifted just enough for the guitar pendant to show. Julian looked stunned, his gaze flickering as though he'd just been pulled from a dream. What just happened? He asked, voice low and calm, but his eyes locked on her. Cassie mumbled, just a game. I'm sorry. She turned before he could say anything else and bolted back to the bar, her heart ready to explode. Lena and the others clapped and snickered, but Cassie wished she could vanish. You're insane, Cassie, Miguel laughed. She shook her head, trying to focus on wiping glasses, but the feel of his lips still haunted her. In the corner of the room, Julian still stood, his finger lightly touching his mouth. He wasn't used to being surprised. As the CEO of Hayes Innovations, he'd built walls around himself long ago, after his fiancée's betrayal. But that girl, with the guitar necklace and nervous eyes, had shaken something loose. He watched her through the crowd, saw her quietly mixing drinks, softly humming a tune. That melody, raw and honest, threaded its way into his mind. Cassie's shift ended at midnight. She pocketed her tips, just enough to buy a new set of guitar strings, and stepped into the cold street. New York air turned her breath into pale mist. Pulling her coat tighter, she thought about the kiss. Idiot, she scolded herself. Julian Hayes was someone she'd never see again. He belonged to a world of chandeliers and tuxedos. She had her guitar, and dreams still out of reach. She took the subway back to Brooklyn. Her tiny apartment greeted her with the smell of old wood and warm yellow lights. Her acoustic guitar lay on the bed, the only friend who truly understood her. Cassie sat down, strummed a few chords, and softly sang a line from a song she was writing. Lost in the city, chasing a spark. The melody rose, soothing her heart. She didn't know that, in a high-rise penthouse across the city, Julian Hayes was searching for a name on YouTube, Cassie Monroe. A video appeared, her singing in a cafe, voice clear, eyes burning with passion. He clicked play, and for the first time in years felt his heart stir. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Chapter 2, A Chance Encounter. Julian Hayes wasn't used to being haunted. As the CEO of Hayes Innovations, he ran his life the way he ran his company. Everything planned, no room for surprises. But since that night at the charity gala, the image of the girl with the guitar necklace and that unexpected kiss lingered in his mind. Cassie Monroe. He'd found her on YouTube with just a few clicks. Her channel had thousands of followers, enough for a presence but not fame. Her videos, singing in coffee shops, strumming an acoustic guitar in a tiny apartment, carried a raw honesty he couldn't look away from. Her voice, warm and unpolished, pulled him out of the cold, controlled days he was used to. Today, Julian sat in his office on the 50th floor, gazing out over Manhattan. On his computer screen was one of Cassie's videos, a song called City Sparks. The lyrics were simple but hit him deep. Chasing lights but losing heart. He turned off the video, telling himself he didn't have time for such nonsense. But her lips, the look in her eyes as she walked away, kept flashing back. He had to see her again. Not to pursue her. Julian didn't believe in love anymore after his fiancé's betrayal, but to understand why she had shaken him so deeply. The Rusty Anchor, a bar in the Lower East Side, buzzed on Friday night. Cassie stood behind the bar mixing a mojito, neon lights casting a glow on her high-tied brown hair. She wore a black t-shirt, her silver guitar pendant peeking out at the collar. The shift was busy, but she liked the rhythm. It helped her forget the stupid kiss from last week. Julian Hayes. She still blushed thinking about it, wondering what had possessed her. Thankfully, he belonged to a completely different world, and she would never see him again. On her break, Cassie sat in a corner of the bar with the small guitar she always brought along. She liked to sing a song to relax, and tonight she picked one of her own, Under the Noise. Her voice rose, gentle yet full of emotion, telling a story of dreams buried beneath the hum of city life. The crowd gradually quieted. A few turned to listen. Cassie didn't notice. She was singing for herself as always. Julian walked in at that very moment. He wore a navy shirt, no suit, trying to blend into the casual atmosphere of the Rusty Anchor. But his sharp eyes drew a few curious looks. He took a seat in a shadowed corner, ordered a whiskey, and listened. Cassie's voice drifted through the noise, touching him like a breeze. As she sang the final line, "Find me where the silence grows," his heart stirred with a feeling he hadn't known in years. When she finished, a few guests clapped. She smiled, tucked her guitar away, and returned to the bar. Then she saw him, Julian Hayes, sitting there, his eyes locked on her. Her heart slammed. What is he doing here, she wondered, forcing herself to stay calm. "Another whiskey?" she asked, her tone a bit sharp. Julian gave a faint smile, the corner of his mouth lifting. "No, thank you. That was a beautiful song. Did you write it yourself?" Cassie froze. She hadn't expected him to notice, let alone recognize her. "Yeah, just messing around," she said, wiping the counter to hide her nerves. Julian tilted his head. "Didn't sound like messing around. That melody, it made me forget everything for a moment." His words were sincere, but Cassie was wary. Rich men often spoke sweetly. She knew better. "Thanks," she said curtly, turning away to serve another guest. A few days later, Cassie sat in her favorite coffee shop in Williamsburg, a notebook open in front of her. She was jotting down lyrics, caught in a moment, scared to stay. She didn't know who the song was about, but Julian's image kept flickering in her thoughts. She shook her head, telling herself it was just leftover noise from that silly kiss. Julian appeared, as if summoned from her mind. He wore a knit coat, looking more approachable than last time, but still unmistakably him. "Another coincidence," he said, sliding into the seat across from her with a polite nod. Cassie raised an eyebrow. "Is it really?" Julian smiled, not denying it. "I saw you writing something." "Lyrics?" he asked, nodding toward the notebook, curiosity in his eyes. Cassie snapped the notebook shut, slightly annoyed. "Are you following me, Mr. CEO?" Julian raised his hands in mock surrender. "Not following. I just like your music. It's real." Cassie studied him, searching for the usual fake charm, but saw only rare sincerity. They started talking, awkwardly at first, then more naturally. Julian told her he used to play piano in college, but gave it up for work. Cassie admitted she wrote songs to forget bad days. "Music's like a friend that never leaves," she said, and immediately blushed, realizing how vulnerable that sounded. The next day, a package arrived at the Rusty Anchor, addressed to Cassie. Inside was a high-quality condenser microphone, the kind she could only dream of affording. No name, just a note, "For your voice to shine." Cassie frowned, instantly suspecting Julian. Did he think she needed charity? But she couldn't deny it. The mic would seriously improve her recording quality. That night, Julian showed up at the bar, almost like he knew she'd confront him. "You sent the mic, didn't you?" Cassie said, voice a mix of gratitude and challenge. Julian nodded. "I didn't mean to offend. I just think you deserve the best." Cassie sighed, but something in his eyes, gentle, almost lonely, softened her. "Thank you," she said, "but don't think I owe you anything." They talked longer, about music, New York, small things. Cassie realized Julian wasn't like the wealthy men she'd met before. He didn't boast, he didn't control. He listened, really listened, as if her voice was the only thing that mattered. As the bar neared closing, Julian set down his glass. "I'm starting a scholarship fund for underprivileged students," he said. "I want you to be an advisor, to help design the program, and maybe teach music to the kids." Cassie blinked, surprised. "Why me?" Julian looked straight at her. "Because you know how to inspire. I see that in your music." Cassie didn't answer right away. She needed time. Julian stood, leaving behind a business card. "Think about it, Cassie." He walked away, but his gaze lingered, like a melody she couldn't forget. She held the card, her fingers brushing the guitar pendant. For the first time, she wondered if fate was daring her to play a new game. Manhattan in the afternoon buzzed like a never-ending symphony. Car horns, footsteps, and voices all blending on the streets below. Inside the sleek offices of Hayes Innovations, Cassie Monroe sat at a conference table, a stack of documents about the scholarship fund in front of her. She still wasn't used to this world, the glass walls, oversized screens, and the professional chill that hung in the air. But this part-time advisory job was an opportunity to stabilize her finances, and more importantly, to teach music to underprivileged students. Cassie, 28, her signature silver guitar pendant peeking from under her blouse, felt like she had stepped into a world that didn't quite belong to her. And the one who had brought her into it, Julian Hayes, was sitting across from her, those deep blue eyes more intense than she would have liked. Julian, 34, was no longer the cold CEO she'd kissed at the charity gala. He was still polished in a gray shirt, but something gentler surfaced when he spoke about the scholarship fund. "We need a music program that actually inspires," he said, sliding a document across the table. "What do you think about teaching guitar and songwriting to the kids?" Cassie nodded, flipping through the papers, though her mind wandered. She still didn't understand why Julian had chosen her, a bartender, an unknown musician on YouTube, for this. The meeting ended, but Julian asked her to stay a little longer to discuss further. The office slowly emptied, golden light from the sunset spilling through the windows. Cassie placed the small guitar she always carried onto the table, like a silent shield. "I've reviewed the plan," she said in a steady tone. "The kids need something practical, like learning how to turn their feelings into lyrics." Julian smiled slightly. "Like you do?" Cassie blushed. She hadn't expected him to be so familiar with her music. "I just write so I don't go crazy in this city," she said, half joking. Julian stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the streets. "You know, I used to play piano," he said, his voice low. "But I gave it up. Life didn't leave room for it." Cassie tilted her head, curious. "So why do you care about music now?" Julian turned back to her, a shadow in his eyes. "Because it reminds me that I used to feel things." The mood shifted, more intimate. Cassie began strumming a few chords on her guitar, a nervous habit. Julian sat down closer to her, not too close, but near enough for her to feel his presence. "How did you write your first song?" he asked. Cassie paused, her fingers brushing the guitar pendant. She wasn't used to opening up, but his eyes, sincere and non-judgmental, made it easier. "I was 20, she began quietly. "I dated this guy. Thought it was love. He said he'd help me record professionally, but he just wanted money. Took everything I saved for equipment, then left." She gave a bitter laugh. "I wrote my first song the night he disappeared. It was awful, but it kept me from falling apart." Julian listened without interrupting. He saw himself in her story. Betrayals, scars no one else could see. "And you?" Cassie asked, genuinely curious. "A guy like you probably has people around all the time. Why are you alone?" Julian looked at her, surprised by the bluntness. He sighed, and for the first time, his mask slipped. 5 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Elise. I thought she loved me, but she only wanted a tech project I was building. She sold it to my competitor and walked away. It was worth millions, but losing it didn't hurt as much as losing trust. Cassie was silent, hearing the pain in his voice. She strummed a gentle chord, trying to soften the air between them. I don't really know what to say, she admitted, but I think you deserve better. Julian smiled, his first real smile. So do you, Cassie. They kept talking about the streets of New York, how Cassie found melodies in car horns and falling rain. Julian shared how he used to love jazz, but now only listened to music to escape pressure. Cassie teased, Jazz? I thought you were more of a dry symphony kind of guy. Julian laughed, his eyes sparkling. You make me want to listen to your music more. To break the tension, Cassie picked up her guitar. Okay, but don't laugh, she warned, then strummed a slow melody. She sang Streetlight Lullaby, a song she'd written about wandering Brooklyn at night, searching for light in the dark. Her voice was clear and honest, the lyrics telling their own story. Under streetlights were just strangers, holding secrets, chasing dangers. Julian sat motionless, feeling something inside him stir with every note. By the time she sang the final line, he felt a part of himself fill that had long been empty. Cassie stopped, cheeks flushed. It's not finished, she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. Julian looked at her, his voice husky. It's perfect. He pulled out his phone, opened a recording app. Sing it again. I want to keep it. Cassie laughed, shaking her head. Are you nuts? I don't sing on command. But she still played a few chords again, letting him record a short clip. The sound of her guitar filled the office, like a secret only the two of them shared. As the sun finally set, Cassie packed up. Julian walked her to the elevator, the air between them lighter than ever. Do you think music can heal? He asked suddenly. Cassie looked at him, her eyes soft. It saved me. Maybe it can save you too. Julian nodded, saying nothing more, but his eyes said everything. Cassie stepped outside, New York's night air wrapping around her. She thought about Julian, not the wealthy CEO, but the man with scars like hers. Back in his office, Julian replayed the recording. Cassie's voice rang out, raw and real. Under streetlights, we're just strangers. He saved the file to his phone, a rare smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in years, he felt like he could trust someone, and her voice, he knew he wanted to hear it forever. Chapter 3, A Misunderstanding That Shattered Trust. The Plaza Hotel glittered like a palace, crystal chandeliers casting light over ball gowns and tuxedos at tonight's charity gala. Cassie Monroe stood near the bar, wearing a borrowed black dress from Lena, feeling like a stray note in a symphony of luxury. Julian Hayes had invited her as a consultant for the scholarship fund, but the way he'd looked at her over the past few weeks, gentle, attentive, told a deeper story. She had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, he saw her as more than an unknown musician. But tonight her heart was uneasy, like she sensed a storm was coming. Julian's scholarship fund was the centerpiece of the event. On the giant screen, a video played showcasing the students the fund had helped, backed by Streetlight Lullaby, the song Cassie had written. Her voice echoed through the ballroom, raw and emotional, silencing the crowd. Julian stood on stage speaking about the fund's mission, but his eyes scanned the audience for her. Cassie smiled, fingers clutching the strap of her bag where her lyric notebook rested. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but for Julian, she had said yes. After his speech, Cassie was invited on stage to answer questions about the music program. She stepped into the bright lights, heart pounding. A reporter with a sharp smile raised her mic. Ms. Monroe, your song in the video is deeply moving, but I've heard it bears a strong resemblance to a track by Lila Gray. Did you borrow inspiration from her? Cassie froze as if punched in the gut. Streetlight Lullaby was her soul, born from nights wandering Brooklyn. No, she answered, voice trembling. I wrote that song myself. I don't know Layla Gray. The crowd murmured. The reporter pressed on, sweet voice laced with venom. Really? Then what about the rumor that you once dated Martin Kessler? Mr. Hayes's biggest competitor. Did he get you this opportunity? The room went still. Cassie felt the blood drain from her face. Martin Kessler. 4 years ago, when she was just a 24-year-old hopeful musician, Martin had approached her, claiming to be a music producer. He promised to get her into a studio, but only used her to network with artists and sponsors, then disappeared once she was no longer useful. She hadn't known he was a tech businessman or that he had any connection to Julian. She looked at Julian, standing near the stage. His face had darkened. The old pain, Elise's betrayal, selling his $1 million project to Kessler, clearly written in his expression. I didn't know who Martin was back then, Cassie said, her voice cracking. He was just some guy in the music scene. I have no ties to him. But her words were fragile, drowning beneath the crowd's skeptical whispers. The reporter smiled, moving on to another question, leaving Cassie shattered on stage. She stepped down, legs shaky, and found Julian in a corner of the ballroom. He stood alone, fingers clenched around a whiskey glass. Julian, she said, pleading, I didn't know Martin was your rival. He lied to me, used me. And the song, it's mine. Julian looked at her, his eyes colder than she had ever seen. You were his, he said, voice low. And now you're here, in my project. And I'm supposed to believe that's coincidence? Cassie blinked, tears spilling. You think I'm like him? After everything I've shared with you? Julian stepped back, his expression caught between pain and doubt. Elise said she was innocent too, he muttered. She took everything I built and gave it to Kessler. I don't know who to trust anymore, Cassie. His words cut like blades. Cassie backed away, her voice breaking. If you want someone without a past, without mistakes, then I'm not her. She turned and ran, fleeing the ballroom, leaving behind the lights and laughter. Outside the plaza, the New York night was bitterly cold. Cassie hugged herself, trying to hold back the sobs. She had opened her heart to Julian, sung for him, and he met her with suspicion. Her song, the thing she cherished most, was now being called a stolen work. She called a cab and returned to her small apartment in Brooklyn. In the dark, she sat by the window, watching the city lights. But she didn't touch her guitar. Tonight, music couldn't soothe her. Back inside the ballroom, Julian stood alone, whiskey glass empty. Cassie's voice still played on the screen. Under streetlights, we're just strangers. He remembered her singing that in his office, how sincere her eyes had been. But Martin Kessler's name loomed like a ghost, dragging the pain of Elise back to life. He wanted to believe Cassie, but the fear of betrayal was louder. He pulled out his phone and replayed Streetlight Lullaby. Her voice made his heart ache. He had been wrong to say what he did, but he didn't know how to fix it. Julian left the gala without a word. In the back of his car, he listened to her song, Eyes Distant. He wanted to find her, to apologize, but fear held him back. In Brooklyn, Cassie held her notebook and wrote one line. Trust is a song I forgot how to sing. Tears fell as she closed it. Two hearts in the same city, now separated by a melody no one was singing. Early autumn in Pennsylvania was gentler than New York. Tree-lined roads blanketed with golden leaves and the air crisp and clean. Cassie Monroe stood before a small classroom in a community center in a struggling town, her acoustic guitar in hand, guiding a group of kids through basic chords. She had left New York 3 weeks ago, taking a volunteer teaching position through a nonprofit she had contacted long ago. She needed space, not just from the city, but from Julian Hayes and the crushing doubts he had voiced at the charity gala. But even here, among children's laughter, her heart remained heavy, like a song still missing its chorus. Cassie rented a small room in a local boarding house, just big enough for her guitar and lyric notebook. She tried to find her spark again, but every chord reminded her of Julian's eyes, tender in the office, cold at the gala. He'd called her a user, questioned even Streetlight Lullaby, a song born from her own broken pieces. She told herself she was strong, but the pain crept in like autumn wind through old windows. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Julian threw himself into work like a machine. Meetings, contracts, strategies for Hayes innovations filled his days. But at night, he couldn't escape Cassie. He'd rewatch her cafe performance on YouTube, her voice whispering, Under streetlights, we're just strangers. Each note felt like a quiet accusation. He had let fear cloud his trust. Martin Kessler, who'd once manipulated both Elise and Cassie, wasn't worth losing her. Julian opened his laptop and typed an email. Cassie, I'm sorry. I never should have doubted you. Your song, your voice, they're real. I want to make things right. He typed, deleted, typed again, but he didn't send it. Pride and fear of rejection held him back. Instead, he watched a new video Cassie had uploaded days ago, a song called Broken Chords. Its lyrics dripped with pain. You took my song, left me in silence. Trust was a note I couldn't find. Julian listened, heart clenched. She had written it because of him, because of what he said. He closed the laptop, knowing he had to do something, but he didn't know where to start. In Pennsylvania, Cassie was teaching the kids how to write lyrics, encouraging them to tell their own stories through music. She smiled as one shy boy strummed his first chord, but her eyes drifted. She carried her guitar through town, playing in the park, at small cafes, trying to find herself again. One night she sat by the Susquehanna River, writing broken chords in her notebook. The lyrics poured out like tears. I sang for you, but you didn't hear. She uploaded the video, not expecting anyone to watch, only needing release. The next day, an email arrived from Julian's Scholarship Foundation. Subject, Invitation to the Tech and Arts Conference. Cassie opened it, her heart thudding. It was an invitation to perform at a major conference in New York, where Julian would be the keynote speaker. At the bottom was a handwritten message. I want you to sing at the event. Your voice deserves to be heard. Cassie frowned and tossed her phone onto the bed. Was this pity? Guilt? She didn't respond. She decided to stay in Pennsylvania. She didn't need Julian's stage or his gaze. But every night after the kids went home, Cassie sat alone and played her guitar. She tried writing something new, but the melodies always circled back to Julian. His rare smile, the way he had once listened to her, like her voice was the only sound in the world. She shook her head, telling herself she didn't need him. But when a student asked, Miss Cassie, have you ever sung for someone you loved? She went silent, eyes stinging. She had sung for Julian, and he had walked away. Back in New York, Julian couldn't stop thinking about her. He visited the Rusty Anchor, hoping to see her, but found only Lena, who raised an eyebrow when she saw him. She's gone, Mr. CEO, Lena said, her voice biting. She's worth more than you thought. Julian nodded, leaving the bar hollow. He stopped by the cafe in Williamsburg, where he had once watched Cassie write lyrics. Her notebook was gone, but he pictured her sitting there, fingers drifting across the page. One night, he called her. The phone rang, but he hung up before she could answer. He didn't know what to say. He watched Broken Chords again, her lyrics slicing into him. You broke the chords I played for you. He realized how deeply he had hurt her, and that he was the reason. He drafted another email. Cassie, I was wrong. Please let me fix this. But once again, he didn't send it. He feared she wouldn't forgive him, feared she no longer needed him. In Pennsylvania, Cassie received a message from Lena. The CEO showed up. He looked wrecked. He asked about you. Cassie read it, heart tightening, but she didn't reply. She focused on the kids, teaching them a cheerful song about fall. But when one little girl hit the wrong note, giggled and said, I'm sorry, Miss Cassie. Cassie thought of Julian. He had never apologized aloud. But that look in his eyes at the gala, pain, confusion, said he never meant to hurt her. She opened his email again, rereading the handwritten note. Your voice deserves to be heard. She wanted to delete it, but her finger paused. Instead, she closed the laptop, picked up her guitar, and played a new melody, one without words. It was sad, but somewhere in it was hope, like moonlight over the Susquehanna. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but she knew she hadn't forgotten. In his penthouse, Julian stared out over Manhattan. He played Streetlight Lullaby on his phone. Cassie's voice filled the silence. Tender, true. He made a decision. If he ever saw her again, he would apologize, no matter what it took. But where was that chance now when she was hundreds of miles away and their hearts were divided? by melodies no one dared to sing together. He turned off the lights, letting her voice echo in the darkness, hoping one day they'd find their way back. Still with us? If you're hearing this outside Soul Stories, come back to where the story truly began, with heart and honesty. Chapter 4. When Fate Comes Knocking. A bitter October night cloaked New York in shadows, the lights of skyscrapers flickering like candles in the dark. Inside the Javits Convention Center, hundreds gathered for a major tech conference where Julian Hayes, CEO of Hayes Innovations, stood on stage. A spotlight illuminated his Navy suit as he spoke with calm authority about the future of technology and the mission of his scholarship fund. But his mind wasn't on the crowd. It was on Cassie Monroe, the woman whose voice had once awakened his heart. He had sent her an email, inviting her to perform tonight, hoping she'd come. But her silence lingered. He wondered if fate would bring them back together, or if he'd destroyed everything with his mistrust. His keynote ended with polite applause. Julian bowed, his gaze distant, and exited toward the parking lot, where his driver, Mike, waited by the black Bentley. "Long night, sir," Mike said, opening the door. Julian slid into the back seat, pulled out his phone, and saw a YouTube notification. Cassie had uploaded a new video. Broken chords. He tapped play. Her voice poured out, raw and aching. "You took my song, left me in silence." He closed his eyes, guilt rising like a tide. He had let his fear of betrayal eclipse his trust. He whispered, barely audible, "If there's a God, please give me a chance to make this right." The car moved down the avenue, city lights blurring past. Suddenly, a sharp screech. "Hold on, Mr. Hayes," Mike shouted. Julian looked up. Headlights blazed straight into them. The car swerved, then slammed into a median. The crunch of metal tore through the night. Julian was thrown against the door, glass shattering, blood trailing from his temple. Darkness swallowed him, and just before consciousness slipped away, he thought he heard her voice, soft, haunting. Under streetlights were just strangers. In a small Pennsylvania town, Cassie sat in her dimly lit rented room, her guitar resting quietly on the bed. She had just finished another music class for underprivileged kids, trying to find joy in their laughter. But her heart remained tangled in pain, haunted by the gala and Julian's words. "Your voice deserves to be heard." She tried to forget him, but every note she played led back to him. His gaze when she sang, the hurt in his accusations. She turned on the TV to shake the thoughts away, but a breaking news alert interrupted. Tech billionaire Julian Hayes in critical condition following car crash after major conference in New York. Foul play suspected. Images of the crushed Bentley flashed across the screen, police tape flapping in the wind. The anchor reported Julian was in the ICU, his condition grave. Cassie froze, the glass of water in her hand shattering on the floor. His smile, his wounded eyes, all of it crashed into her like a wave. She couldn't breathe. It was as if her own heart had stopped too. She dropped to her knees, clutching the small wooden cross hanging on the wall. Her grandmother's gift, long untouched. "Please, God," she whispered through tears, "don't let it end like this." Her faith had never been strong, but tonight it was the only light left. She thought of Streetlight Lullaby, the song she'd written for Julian, the one he'd once recorded. She had believed it was just a moment. Now she believed maybe, just maybe, she had been led to him, even if only to sing once. Cassie threw her guitar into the back seat of her aging Toyota Corolla. The Pennsylvania night was dark, but she drove, eyes blurred with tears. Highway lights streaked across her windshield. She whispered into the silence, "Please let me get there in time." She remembered what her grandmother used to say, "Faith is walking even when you can't see the path." She didn't know if she still loved Julian or if she was just terrified of losing him, but she had to be there. The radio flicked on automatically. She turned it off. She only wanted to hear the song inside her, holding secrets, chasing dangers. In New York, police combed through the wreckage. The Bentley's brake lines had been deliberately cut, an act of sabotage. A typed threat had arrived at Hayes Innovations that morning. "Drop the project, or next time, no one survives." Investigators suspected Martin Kessler, the same man who had once manipulated both Elise and Cassie. Media outlets swarmed with headlines: tech mogul assassination attempt, rival sabotage, or scandal. But in the ICU at Mount Sinai Hospital, Julian lay unconscious, machines beeping in rhythm with his fragile heartbeat, unaware of the storm outside. Cassie drove through the night 6 hours without stopping. At a gas station, she gripped the cross in her pocket, whispering, "Please keep him safe." As dawn broke, she reached New York. She parked outside the hospital, hair tangled, guitar slung across her back. Inside, a nurse guided her to the ICU. Only family was allowed in, but she was permitted to look through the glass. Julian lay still, head bandaged, face pale, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. Cassie froze, tears streaming silently. It felt like the world had collapsed. She sank onto a bench outside the room, her guitar beside her. A nurse passed by, gave her a kind look, but said nothing when Cassie began to hum softly. Streetlight lullaby. Just above a whisper, "Under streetlights, we're just strangers." Her voice cracked, but she kept singing, like a prayer, a plea, a lifeline. She believed, even if just a little, that God might be listening, that fate hadn't finished their story yet. As her song ended, she bowed her head, whispering, "Julian, please don't go." She didn't know if he could hear her, didn't know if he would wake, but she was there, with trembling faith and a voice full of love, hoping it was enough to bring him back. Inside the ICU, Julian's heartbeat, though weak, persisted, and somewhere, in the deep shadows of unconsciousness, a distant melody stirred. Familiar, soft, like her voice, like a light calling him home. Mount Sinai Hospital shimmered under the cold, sterile, white lights, the steady beeping of machines marking a rhythm that refused to cease. Inside the ICU room, Julian Hayes lay motionless, his head and chest wrapped in white bandages, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. The sharp, commanding features of the powerful CEO had softened into something pale and vulnerable. Cassie Monroe sat beside him, trembling hands resting on the acoustic guitar across her lap. She had been there since morning, after driving all night from Pennsylvania, fueled only by fragile hope and a desperate prayer that God would keep him alive. Her eyes stayed fixed on Julian, as if the moment she looked away, he might vanish. Cassie hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten, save for a weak cup of coffee from the vending machine. The nurse had allowed her into the ICU for a few hours, with one rule: no noise. But she hadn't said anything about singing softly. Her hair was tangled, her eyes red from crying. She thought of those brief but unforgettable weeks, working with Julian, the way he had listened to Streetlight Lullaby in his office, how his eyes had softened like he was about to say something that never came. Then the gala, his doubt, his cruel words. She'd left New York believing she was strong enough to forget him. But now, seeing him like this, broken and still, she knew she wasn't strong enough to lose him. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his. His skin was cold. "Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I thought I was strong when I left New York, when I ignored your email. But I'm not. I'm weak. I can't lose you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, soaking into her worn coat. She bowed her head, murmuring a prayer. "Dear God, please give him another chance. If this is destiny, don't let it end like this." Her faith had always been a flicker, but now it was the only light guiding her through the dark. She picked up her guitar, her fingers brushing softly over the strings, and then she began to sing. Her voice was fragile, barely more than a breath. "Under streetlights, we're just strangers, holding secrets, chasing dangers." The melody drifted through the room like incense, sacred, trembling. She sang not for performance, not for praise, but as prayer. Each note was a lifeline, tying her to him. When she reached the final lines, her voice broke completely. "I love you, Julian. Whether you hear me or not, I love you." She lowered her head, tears soaking her sleeves. And then, something. A faint squeeze. His fingers wrapped loosely around hers. Cassie froze, breath catching in her throat. She looked up. His eyes were still closed, but a single tear trailed from the corner of his eye. "Julian?" she whispered, voice shaking. He didn't respond, still hovering somewhere between unconsciousness and wakefulness. But the pressure of his fingers, subtle, deliberate, was enough. She clutched his hand, sobbing openly now, the moment a fragile miracle in her arms. God had heard her. Somehow, against all odds, he had heard. She refused to leave, even when the nurse gently reminded her visiting hours had ended. Cassie pulled out her notebook and began to write. Lyrics scribbled hastily, born from emotion and need. "In the quiet, I found you. Through the darkness, faith pulled through." There was no title yet, only a heartbeat and a promise. She kept glancing at Julian, half expecting him to open his eyes at any moment. She whispered, "You have to wake up, Julian. I still owe you a song." Outside the ICU, the world churned. News crews camped in the hospital lobby, headlines flashing across screens. Billionaire tech mogul survives assassination attempt. Brake lines cut, all eyes on rival Martin Kessler. Police confirmed the crash had been deliberate, and all signs pointed to Julian's longtime nemesis, Kessler, the same man who had once deceived both Elise and Cassie. But inside that hospital room, none of that mattered. Cassie didn't care about enemies, business, or the media. She only cared about the man in the bed. She reached into her pocket, fingers finding the small wooden cross her grandmother had left her. She clutched it tightly. God brought me here, she thought. Now please, keep him with me. She stayed at the hospital all day, only stepping away for a brief moment to call Lena. "I'm not going back to Pennsylvania right now," she said quietly. On the other end, Lena sighed. "You love him, don't you?" Cassie didn't respond. She just said, "Thank you." She returned to Julian's bedside and began to write again. She wrote about faith, about love, about things she once believed she wasn't worthy of. Each line on the page was a step closer to him, closer to healing what was broken. Near midnight, the doctor entered, glancing at Julian's chart. Cassie rose to her feet, heart racing. "Ms. Monroe," the doctor said in a calm voice, "he's past the critical phase. His vitals are stabilizing. He'll need rest, time, but he's going to recover. It may take weeks or longer." Cassie nodded, tears sliding down her face again, this time out of relief. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes on Julian. He was still unconscious, but the slight squeeze of his hand, the single tear down his cheek, it had been enough. She knew he had heard her. Somewhere in that dreamlike void, he had reached for her. She sat back down, placing her notebook beside the bed. She didn't sing anymore. She just held his hand, feeling warmth slowly return to it. She leaned close, whispering, "I'll be here, Julian, no matter how long it takes." She looked toward the window where the lights of New York glittered like scattered notes of a song. And deep in her heart, stronger now than ever, was the belief that destiny had led them to each other, and that God would lead them through this night. Inside the ICU, Julian's heartbeat continued, steady and true. A quiet melody beginning again, promising one day they would sing it together. Chapter 5. A Fragile Reunion. Autumn sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of Mount Sinai Hospital, warming the recovery room where Julian Hayes lay. 4 days had passed since the accident. Though he was no longer in the ICU, his body remained weak, a fresh scar peeking from beneath the bandage on his forehead. Cassie Monroe sat by his bedside, hands clasped tightly, her expression tender but anxious. She had been there from the moment he was admitted, leaving only briefly to shower and call Lena. Her faith, both in God and in the fate that had led her back to Julian, was the flame that kept her steady, even as her heart fluttered every time she looked at him. Julian opened his eyes, the blue of them dim by medication, but brightening when they met hers. "You're here," he rasped. Cassie blinked back tears and smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." Her voice trembled as she told him about the overnight drive from Pennsylvania, about the moment she saw him still and unconscious in the ICU. "I sang to you," she said softly. "Streetlight lullaby. I prayed God would let you hear me, let you stay." Julian listened, a dull ache rising in his chest, but it was softened by warmth. He remembered her voice, distant like light in a long tunnel, pulling him back from the dark. You stayed the whole time, he murmured, as if needing confirmation. Cassie nodded, fingers brushing the small wooden cross in her pocket. I couldn't leave you alone. He reached for her hand. The motion made him wince, but he managed it. Cassie, he said, his voice raw, you're here when I have nothing. No power, no reputation. You're my family. His words fell like a prayer, bare and honest. Cassie bowed her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, though her smile bloomed through them. I wrote that song in the ICU, for you, she admitted. I didn't realize how much I loved you, until I almost lost you. Julian squeezed her hand gently. His eyes said what his voice couldn't. I heard you. Your voice was my light. The door opened, breaking the moment. Emma Hayes stepped inside, her blonde hair tied back, her gray suit perfectly pressed. At 38, she was a respected attorney in Boston, always composed, but her eyes now brimmed with concern. Julian, she said, her tone firm but shaky, you scared me to death. She leaned down to hug him gently, careful not to jostle his injuries. Julian offered a faint smile. You got here fast, Emma. Her gaze shifted to Cassie, curious but kind. And you are? Julian introduced her without hesitation. Cassie Monroe, she saved me. Emma gave Cassie a nod of quiet appraisal, then softened. Thank you, she said. Rachel told me you've been here since the beginning. Rachel Nguyen, Julian's assistant, entered just behind Emma, holding an iPad and a bouquet of yellow daisies. At 30, she was efficient, loyal, and rarely frazzled. Today, she looked visibly relieved. Boss, she said with a teasing smile, don't scare me like that again. She placed the flowers on the table and updated him. Mike, your driver, has a sprained wrist and some bruises, but he's home resting. He sends his regards. Cassie listened quietly, feeling like she just stepped into another part of Julian's life. Emma sat, recounting how she had flown in the moment she heard. Our parents have been gone a long time. It's always been just the two of us, she said, looking at her brother. You've always kept things to yourself, but this time, I really thought I'd lost you. Julian squeezed her hand. I'm okay, because of Cassie. Emma looked at Cassie with gratitude. Looks like my brother finally found someone worth trusting. Rachel shifted the conversation to work, explaining that she was coordinating with police about the crash. Moments later, Detective Ramirez arrived, handing Julian a business card. The brake lines were cut, Ramirez said grimly. We received an anonymous threat targeting your project. Our prime suspect is Martin Kessler. Julian's expression darkened. He explained how Kessler had manipulated both Elise and Cassie for personal gain. Cassie froze at the name, pain flashing across her face. We'll help the police, she said firmly. He's hurt enough people. Julian gave her a look full of respect. Emma nodded. I'll provide any legal support needed. Once Ramirez and Emma departed, Rachel lingered just long enough to urge Julian to rest. The company's fine, boss. Just focus on healing, she said, then winked at Cassie before leaving. Silence returned to the room, intimate and still. Julian turned to Cassie, his voice softer. Your voice didn't just save me, it can inspire others. He proposed that she perform at the Foundation's major upcoming event once he recovered, so the world could hear her gift. Cassie blushed. I'm not a star, Julian. He smiled faintly, despite the pain. You're my star. Cassie shared stories of the kids in Pennsylvania, how they were learning chords and writing their first lyrics. Julian listened, his eyes gleaming. You make me want to live better, he said. Cassie leaned down and kissed his forehead, a soft, reverent touch. Then you better get well, she whispered. I still have so many songs for you. She placed her notebook on the bedside table, opened to a new song. In the quiet, I found you. Julian reached out, touching the page. His eyes said he understood. This song belonged to them. Cassie stepped into the hallway, sat on a bench, and whispered a quiet prayer. Thank you, God, for keeping us. Her faith had carried her through fear, and now it lifted her toward hope. Outside the hospital, New York glittered, its lights like scattered notes waiting to be sung. Julian and Cassie had found each other again, fragile but real. And with Cassie's music as their bridge, they would begin anew, trusting that fate and faith would guide their next verse together. You're watching Soul Stories, home of original, heart-touching tales. Leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. This story lives here and only here. Thank you for being with us. Chapter 5. Building a Future Together. 3 months after the accident, New York was wrapped in the golden glow of autumn. Leaves danced across the sidewalks, and the chill in the air carried the scent of change. Julian Hayes, though still walking with a cane, had finally left Mount Sinai and returned to his Manhattan penthouse. The scar on his forehead had faded, but his eyes shone brighter than ever, thanks to Cassie Monroe. She was by his side every day, her guitar slung over her shoulder, her smile like sunlight in every room, her faith in God and in the destiny that had brought them through darkness was the wind beneath them both. Now, hand in hand, they were rebuilding what had once been broken. Cassie, now a co-founder of Julian's Scholarship Foundation, threw herself into reviving the project. Together, they planned a benefit concert at Lincoln Center, blending music and mission to support underprivileged students. Though nervous, Cassie agreed to headline the event, bringing Streetlight Lullaby and a new song, Quiet Light, to the stage. Julian, still in recovery, managed the work from home, with Rachel, his steadfast assistant, handling logistics. Emma, Julian's sister, flew in from Boston to provide legal support, ensuring the foundation ran smoothly. Each morning, Cassie arrived at Julian's penthouse with coffee from their favorite Williamsburg cafe and her lyric notebook in hand. They sat by the window overlooking Central Park, talking about the foundation and about the future. Julian, once guarded, opened up more each day, telling her stories of his childhood with Emma, playing piano in their parents' home in Connecticut. Cassie spoke of writing songs in her Brooklyn apartment to keep the pain at bay. "I think God gave me music," she whispered one morning, fingers touching the cross in her pocket, "so I could find you." Julian smiled, lacing his fingers with hers, "And I thank him for that." One crisp afternoon, they walked slowly through Central Park, leaves falling like golden confetti around them. Julian's steps were careful but sure. They paused at Bow Bridge, where sunlight shimmered on the water like scattered notes. Julian, in a soft navy sweater, reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver ring, engraved with two simple words, "First kiss." His eyes met hers, steady and sincere. "Cassie," he said, voice low, "our first kiss started as a dare, but it became the beginning of everything. If that was chapter 1, would you write the rest of our story with me?" Cassie blinked, her eyes filling with tears. She thought of that night at the gala, of his voice in the ICU calling her family, of his hand in hers when he came back to life. She nodded, voice trembling. "Yes, Julian, forever." He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, clumsily with the cane, but with all the warmth of a man reborn. They kissed, gentle, deep, like a prayer answered. Cassie whispered, "Thank you, God, for bringing us here." Julian kissed her forehead. "And for bringing me you." Back at the penthouse, Rachel was waiting with news from Detective Ramirez. "The police found evidence," she said, handing Julian an iPad. "A former employee of Kessler confessed. He hired someone to sabotage your brakes." Emma arrived moments later, adding, "I've spoken with attorneys in New York. Kessler won't walk away from this." Julian squeezed Cassie's hand, his expression resolute. "He hurt both of us," he said. "Now, we end this." Cassie nodded, a sense of peace washing over her. The ghost of Martin Kessler no longer held power over them. The night of the Lincoln Center concert arrived like a hush before a song. Cassie stood backstage, clutching her guitar, heart pounding. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose, her nerves electric. Julian sat in the front row beside Emma and Rachel. His eyes held pride, reverence, love. Mike, his driver, his arm fully healed, was there too, clapping enthusiastically. As the lights dimmed and then rose, Cassie stepped onto the stage. She opened with Streetlight Lullaby. Under streetlights were just strangers. The audience fell into reverent silence, then erupted into applause. She followed with Quiet Light, the song she'd written in the hospital. "In the quiet, I found you, through the darkness. Faith pulled through." Her lyrics told their story. from an impulsive kiss to a confession beside a hospital bed. By the final note, the crowd was on its feet, many with tears in their eyes. Julian's heart swelled. The press later called her an indie voice with soul, the future of New York music. But for Cassie, the only review that mattered was the look in Julian's eyes. You are my everything. After the show, they hosted a small gathering at the penthouse. Emma raised her glass, teasing, I never thought my buttoned-up brother would get engaged to a rising star. Rachel grinned. I bet Mike didn't see it coming either. He's been retelling that romantic hospital saga all week. Mike shrugged from the corner. I just drive the car, but I knew she was special from day one. Cassie blushed, leaning into Julian's shoulder. He kissed her hair and whispered, You make everything better. When the guests had left, Julian and Cassie stood at the window, gazing down at Central Park. She strummed a few gentle chords on her guitar, a new melody humming to life, one still without lyrics. Julian wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice soft. Write this one for us. Cassie nodded, her fingers brushing the ring marked first kiss, and in her heart, she whispered, Thank you, God, for giving us a future. Her music, now part of their shared life, flowed like the city lights below, guiding them forward. Hand in hand, they faced the unknown. With love and faith, nothing could break them. Martin Kessler remained a name in a file, no longer a shadow. Cassie and Julian, bound by music and fate, were writing their next song together. A song called Forever. 1 year after the accident, Manhattan shimmered in lights for the charity gala at the same glass tower in Midtown, where Cassie Monroe and Julian Hayes had first met. The marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers that sparkled like musical notes, and the laughter of the elite mingled with the clinking of wine glasses. Cassie stood backstage, dressed in a radiant red gown that hugged her figure, a guitar in her arms and her heart pounding. Tonight she wasn't a bartender. She was the star of the evening, about to perform Forever's song, a piece written about her and Julian's journey, from a daring kiss to a lifelong promise. Julian, fully recovered, stood near the stage, his black tux accentuating his steady frame. The faint scar on his forehead was the only visible trace of the past, but his eyes gleamed as he watched Cassie. Their scholarship fund had now supported hundreds of students, and tonight's gala celebrated that success. Emma sat at the front table, eyes shining with pride. Rachel, ever the multitasker, was overseeing logistics while whispering to Mike, who had returned to work after the crash. She's going to make everyone cry, Rachel murmured. Mike nodded, smiling. I knew from the first time I saw her sing. Cassie stepped into the spotlight, her hair cascading over her shoulders. She strummed the first chord, her voice clear and soulful as Forever's song began. From a dare to a dream, you found me. In the chaos, love crowned me. The lyrics traced their love story, from that impulsive kiss at a gala, to a whispered I love you in a hospital room, to the first kiss ring beneath the trees of Central Park. The room stilled. Many reached for tissues as tears welled up. Julian watched, heart full, remembering the first time she sang Streetlight Lullaby. She had cracked open the walls around his heart, and now she was his world. As the final note lingered, the crowd rose to their feet, applause thunderous. Cassie smiled and bowed, but her eyes searched only for Julian. He walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and spoke, his voice low, clear, unwavering. 1 year ago, in this very place, one kiss broke down every wall I had. He turned to her, gaze locked. The audience buzzed, sensing something monumental. He knelt, pulling a gold ring from his jacket, more brilliant than the first, but still engraved with the words, First Kiss. Cassie Monroe, he said, you gave me a family, a song, a life. Will you turn our first kiss into our forever kiss? Cassie's eyes shimmered with tears. She looked at the man who had once doubted her, nearly lost her, but now stood as her everything. Yes, Julian, she whispered, forever. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, a few joyful whistles. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger and rose, pulling her into his arms. They kissed, not as a dare, but as a promise. Cassie whispered, fingers brushing the cross in her dress pocket. Thank you, God, for him. Julian kissed her forehead and echoed, and for you. Emma stood, clapping through tears. My stubborn little brother finally got it right, she said to Rachel, laughing. Rachel raised her phone to capture the moment. This is definitely going viral. Mike nodded warm-eyed. They earned it. In a corner, Lena shouted, You better get married fast, Monroe. Cassie laughed, leaning into Julian. It felt like the whole world was singing with her. After the proposal, she returned to the stage and sang Quiet Light, the song born in the silence of the ICU. Her voice soared through lyrics of faith and love that had carried them through darkness. The crowd rose again, tears in their eyes. The press later wrote, Cassie Monroe isn't just a voice, she's the soul of New York. Julian watched from the wings, his heart full. This song, their story, it all proved fate had chosen right. The night wound down, but the joy didn't end. Rachel returned with news. Detective Ramirez just emailed. They've arrested Martin Kessler. Full confession, solid evidence. Emma, calling from Boston, said firmly, He won't walk free this time. I'll see to it. Julian squeezed Cassie's hand. He's the past. Cassie nodded, a sense of release washing over her. Martin Kessler, who once tried to manipulate and destroy, was no longer a shadow in their lives. They stepped out into the night, the city glowing around them like a living symphony. Cassie held Julian's hand, the first kiss ring gleaming in moonlight. They made a quick stop at a nearby recording studio where Cassie, with help from the Foundation's team, had recorded the final version of Forever's song. When it was released, the track soared up the indie charts, quickly becoming a phenomenon. But to Cassie, the true success was watching Julian listen to it, eyes lit up as if hearing her heart. In the car with Mike driving, they passed Central Park, where Julian had first proposed. He wrapped his arm around her and murmured, Write a new song for our wedding. Cassie smiled, nodded, and touched the cross at her neck. She whispered silently, Thank you, God, for this future. Her music now pulsed with their shared life.